Welcome. Research company IRLAB have released its report for the first quarter in 2023. To present the results, I have on link CEO Gunnar Olsson, Executive Vice President Nicholas Waters, also Head of Research and Development, and CFO Viktor Siverts. After the presentation, there will be held a Q&A session with equity analysts. With that, I'll hand it over to the company. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this webcast on quarter one results for IRLAB. If we take the next slide and the next again. So today's agenda, I, Gunnar Olsson and the CEO, I will present highlights during the quarter. And Nicholas Waters, Head of R&D, will give you an update on the R&D. And then Viktor Siverts, our CFO, will give a financial update. And I will come back and do some concluding words to lead into the Q&A session. So, a summary of events during the first quarter, if I get the first slide. IRLAB participated in the 6th Neuroscience Innovation Forum in San Francisco the first week of January. And this is a congress running in parallel with the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. In the same week, the first week of January, we also nominated a new development candidate, IRL1117. And this is a candidate drug that comes from the P003 research project. 1117 will be developed to be a once daily oral treatment for the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And that is the tremor, the rigidity, and the bradykinesia. However, this will be a medicine that will not have the troublesome fluctuation of effects and the complications that we see with long-term levodopa treatment, today's mainstay therapy in Parkinson. A medicine with this profile has the potential to replace levodopa in the future. Next. In mid-January, we announced the top-line results from the Phase IIb study with mesdopetam in patients with Parkinson and levodopa-induced dyskinesia. Even if the study didn't reach statistical significance in the primary endpoint, the study still achieved its purpose of confirming dose-dependent efficacy, and it made it possible to select the best dose for further clinical studies in Phase III. Mesdopetam demonstrated in the study clear antidyskinetic effect throughout the 12-week treatment period. And on the safety and tolerability side, mesdopetam was on par with placebo. The antidyskinetic effect was achieved without reducing normal motor function. And this is, of course, very important. And the profile was further strengthened by a clear reduction in off time. Detailed analysis of the full data set is still ongoing in collaboration with our partner Ipsen. And we aim to present all the data during the year. In mid-February, the company announced an update of the portfolio development milestones following an internal assessment of the operational priorities for the year. On February the 20th, I was appointed as an interim CEO following Richard Godfrey's termination. Carola Lemne, former vice chair, took over the role as chairperson of the board. And Ann van Es Johansson elected to leave her role as a board member on the 21st of February. As a new chairperson of IRLAB, Carla Lemne took over the membership in the nomination committee from me since I signed chairperson of the board. Next, please. At the end of March, IRLAB presented new data regarding our candidates 942, 757 and the ISP platform at the International Conference on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and related neurological disorders. At the same conference, the industry symposium was organized by IRLAB on the last of March. And the symposium had the title, The Management Dilemma of Parkinson's Disease Progression and Emerging Treatment Approaches. The symposium was recorded and it is available through a link on the IRLAB website. Next, please. Beginning of May, IRLAB was made aware that in 2022 universal registration document published on April 6th contained incorrect information that the development and commercialization rights for mesdopetam have been transferred back to IRLAB. This is incorrect, and Ipsen corrected the universal registration document on May the 4th. Following a contact from Ipsen on May the 1st, a discussion has been initiated with IRLAB to mutually agree the best way forward for the mesdopetam program to reach registration and to ensure that mesdopetam can be made available to patients with Parkinson's disease. Next, please. Financial highlights in brief. During the quarter, we had no recorded sales. We had a total operational expenses of 59.5 million. Victor will go more into detail the reasons why the uptake of the total operating expenses. We had an operating result of minus 59.5 million and cash flow from operations 41.5 million, and cash equivalents at the end of the period amounted to 210 million. The total number of registered shares at the end of the period is just south of 52 million. Next, please. So, IRLAB at a glance. We are working with pioneering biology. We have the unique USP platform, and this is built on very deep and profound understanding of Parkinson's disease emanating from the field around also Nobel laureate around Parkinson. We have a focused strategy. We also provide therapy to any Parkinson patient throughout the disease journey. We have validated the way we work. We have discovered new CEDs. We've taken them from CED to phase 2 validation in patients, and our first program is out for major pharma. We have a broad and solid portfolio, and I would actually take in my mouth and say that within the Parkinson space, I think we have a world-leading portfolio with 5 unique candidates, all with blockbuster potential, and they are all discovered through our disruptive ISP platform. We are an organization positioned for success, and we are listed on the Stockholm. And with that, I think it's time to move into the R&D update. So please, Nicholas.
Thank you, Gunnar. And thank you all for listening today. I will go through a few aspects of our development programs as we stand here. IRLAB has a profound understanding of CNS brain as a important organ in our bodies. We've been working with those issues over the past 4 or 5 decades now together as a team. IRLAB, however, has a very strong focus on Parkinson's disease. And just to initiate the discussion, I wanted to give you some feedback or some information about the problems in Parkinson's disease. And it depends basically on the loss of dopamine neurons, which around 80%, 50 to 80% of all cells containing dopamine are lost, and then you get the symptoms. And the symptoms are very clear to a physician. You get tremor, bradykinesia, rigidity, shaking, slowness of movement, and stiffness. And later on in the development of the disorder, you also get trouble with balance and falls. During the course of the disease, there are a number of options to treat the available, but all are basically based on the basic treatment with levodopa, which is converted to dopamine in the brain and thus exerts the effect of the lost dopamine. This is a fantastic innovation and discovery once upon a time, and it helps patients across the globe. However, there are a number of issues which are not treated. Next slide, please. And that is actually very well expressed by the patients. And this is a study that has been financed by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, where they've interviewed or collected information from 25,000 people living with Parkinson's disease. That's people having Parkinson's disease. And they are asked which are their biggest problems. And this is something that is really, really important to know when you are focusing on treatments for Parkinson's disease. And interestingly, one of the most compelling discoveries, at least to me in this study, is that the patients still have problem with the hallmark symptoms of Parkinson's disease. That is bradykinesia, the slowness of movement, and the tremor, despite the fact that L-DOPA is available. And to me and to us, that tells what has also been published, that patients in general are undertreated with levodopa. And that has to do with the risks that are associated with the treatment with levodopa. I'll come back to that. One of the most important factors that came out from this study was that patients have real problems with falls and balance. And that is something that we are addressing. And this is the biggest issue. It has been rarely talked about in the past 20 years, but there is a surging interest in this aspect of Parkinson's disease now. Then we have the neuropsychiatric symptoms, which are also compelling to the patients. And that's, of course, psychosis, which is one aspect. There's also mood swings, apathy, which are important aspects of the neuropsychiatric complications in Parkinson. Next, please. Besides the fact that these patients are to some extent undertreated and not fully treated, there is also a surge of diagnosis ongoing across the globe, and that has to do with the aging population on the globe. So the expectation is that we'll see a doubling in the number of patients diagnosed in the next 15 to 20 years. So in a sense, this is a real pandemic. Next, please. We have used, as Gunnar pointed out, our top instrument to discover and also develop new treatments for Parkinson's disease. We call it our discovery machine, the ISP, the integrative screening process. This is an advanced systems biology approach combined with modern mathematical methodology, to find new molecules, design and synthesize and test new molecules, which have beneficial effects in certain brain states. And in our case, we are focusing very much on Parkinson, as I said. We have proven advantages with this system. We see that we can discover truly novel first-in-class compounds. Both our clinical assets, mesdopetam and Pirepemat, are first-in-class compounds. As a consequence of the discovery engine, we also get very strong IPR. We discover things that are not discoverable by other methodologies. And then we also see, if we go back in time, we see that we have an improved likelihood of phase transition or probability of drug discovery success with this technology. Next, please. So using the technology, we have based our pipeline products on needs for Parkinson patients. So if we look at the next slide, or next click. First of all, we have the bradykinesia, the tremor, and the rigidity, which is undertreated today. And here we have developed 1117. Next, please. 1117 is our target molecule for these symptoms. And this is a molecule which can, as Gunnar pointed out, has the potential actually to replace levodopa in the future. But above all, this is a treatment that the patients can take hopefully once daily and without the complications of levodopa. Next, please. Next again. To treat the dyskinesias which are associated with levodopa treatment for short or long term, studies indicate that only a couple of years after initiation of levodopa treatment in patients, dyskinesias are starting to emerge and psychosis. And this is a complicating factor in the treatment algorithm. It often means that patients go down in levodopa dosing to avoid the dyskinesias. And mesdopetam has been discovered and developed through Phase IIb to actually treat levodopa and even possibly prevent the occurrence of levodopa-induced dyskinesias. Next, please. Later on in the development of the disorder, the neuropsychiatric symptoms become very apparent. Next, please. Next. Next. So we have two assets here, IRL757 focusing on apathy and the neurobiology behind apathy. We're trying to correct aspects of cortical, subcortical, that is signaling from upper layers of the brain to lower levels of the brain, or deeper levels of the brain, I should say, to treat apathy. And then we have 942 in development, preclinical development right now, for cognitive deficits or cognitive impairment in Parkinson's disease. And cognition is a huge problem. Dementia is a consequence of Parkinson's disease. It's like Alzheimer's or dementia's disease. There are very poor treatment alternatives in this space, in this indication, I should say, for these patients. And therefore, we are looking at 942 as a better treatment for cognitive impairment. Both of these molecules are focusing on neuropsychiatric symptoms, which, of course, have a broader scope than just Parkinson's disease. So here we're looking at additional neuropsychiatric and neurodegenerative disorders. And last but not least, next, please. In the later stages of Parkinson's disease, balance and falls becomes a huge problem. Next. As also indicated by the patients themselves. And there we have developed Pirepemat, which is now in a huge Phase IIb study across Europe. Next, please. Few words on mesdopetam. This is a dopamine D3 receptor antagonist discovered by ISP. It also has potential in the treatment of psychosis and Parkinson's or Parkinson's disease psychosis, but also as a prevention for levodopa-induced dyskinesias. The program is licensed to Ipsen, our collaboration partner, which we're working towards further studies. We're working together with them towards further studies and eventually a registration of the product. Next, please. So during the course of development of mesdopetam, we have taken it through a quite comprehensive program of phase 1 and phase 2 studies by now. First of all, we have the phase 1 study in healthy volunteers. We did a small phase 1b study in Scandinavia, where we actually collected the first signs of efficacy using the Unified Dyskinesia Rating Scale, the UDysRS, and other scales. We had a nice effect, and this is published. Then we have the phase 2a study, where we continued to expand the population, looking at other instruments for measuring dyskinesia, but also exploring the best methodology to collect information about antidyskinetic efficacy and the consequences in terms of function for the patients. And more recently, as Gunnar alluded to, we have published data from our phase 2b study, top-line data from a large phase 2b study, which we conducted in the US, Europe, and Israel. The findings there is that we have a dose-dependent pattern of efficacy across antidyskinetic scales, or the scales used in the study. We do see an improvement in OFF in the study, as published. And then we also can conclude that this is a safe and very highly tolerable compound, much more so than competitors that we know the data about, and that is mainly the registered product amantadine. So we have expanded the information across these studies about the effect of mesdopetam. We also learned a lot about how to manage clinical trials in this space during the period, and also how to administer the scales that are used. And the perhaps most gratifying thing with this study was that we came out with a highly significant effect on, or nominally significant effect on, the UDysRS scale, which is the scale preferred by regulatory bodies across the globe to assess on-phase dyskinesia, which is the thing we want to treat. So next steps is presenting to you a plan for phase 3 and also registration. Next, please. Pirepemat. This is a molecule we have developed over a couple of years. This is a totally new approach to the treatment for a treatment in Parkinson's disease, focusing on falls and balance. We have an ongoing study across Europe, and this is a wholly owned asset at this time. Next, please. Why is it important to prevent falls in Parkinson's disease? Well, as you hear from the patient, this is one of the biggest problems, and actually about 50% of all Parkinson's patients fall on a yearly basis, and much more than that, actually. And patients who fall, they have a shorter lifetime expectancy as well. And the reasons for falling is, of course, a complex thing, but the mechanism that we are focusing on with Pirepemat is those that are related to cortical function, the upper layers of the brain, and which are associated with the cognitive decline. It has been published and known for a couple of decades, actually, that the cognitive decline leads to impaired balance, or is correlated to impaired balance and falls, which is, of course, something that occurs in the later stages of Parkinson's disease. Next, please. Pirepemat has been designed then to activate those neural pathways in the cortical areas of the brain, which are associated to falls and cognitive decline. We do so by inhibiting the activity at 5-HT7 and alpha-2 receptors. And the combined effect here leads to a quite significant activation of neuronal activity in frontal cortical areas. There is a huge number of patients out there needing treatment. And this is, as I said, a totally new indication in terms of drug development. So we are addressing a new untapped market as well with this program. The cost of injuries related to falls in the elderly and especially in Parkinson's disease is really high. CDC has estimated that the fall ending up in a hospital for leading to hospitalization actually costs around $30,000 to treat. So there is much to be gained, both from the individual perspective and from the societal and cost perspective with a new treatment. Next, please. Also here, we have taken it through a quite comprehensive program. We have published much of the documentation around this molecule in highly ranked scientific journals. Next, please. Phase 1 studies. We've done Phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers indicating that the drug is highly tolerable, safe in healthy volunteers. We have defined a new formulation for the compound, which we are using in the current studies. We have explored the pharmacokinetics in Phase 1 with a tablet formulation. We have generated Phase IIa data indicating that the kinetics are the same in the intended treatment population, but also we found quite significant signals of improvement of balance, less falls. We saw improvement in neuropsychiatric endpoints such as apathy, and we also had a significant effect on cognitive function with Pirepemat. And all this points towards cortical activation of Pirepemat, which we are now exploring in a large Phase IIb study. Next, please. And this study is a study with the intention to explore the efficacy and safety of Pirepemat in a much larger population. This is a 165 patient study, which we are conducting in 5 or 6 countries, I can't remember now, across Europe. We are looking at falls and falls frequency. We are also looking at cognitive function, the core symptoms of Parkinson, of course, we don't want to affect those, and then the postural dysfunction, but also a global function assessment for these patients. Next, please. The study design is quite simple. We have one placebo arm and we have 2 treatment arms, one at 300 milligrams and one at 600 milligrams. We have some specifics when it comes to inclusion criteria, and that is that the patients should have fallen at least 2 times in the month preceding randomization into the study. We have also a run-in period in this study. And there's a 3-month treatment period followed by a couple of weeks follow-up and tapering of the treatment. We are in the middle of this trial. It's from my perspective, it looks really nice in terms of recruitment. We have also quite recently expanded into the Netherlands, employing or including a couple of expert sites in the Netherlands, where some of the most prominent falls researchers in the world actually work. And they have a quite large patient population there as well. And we're looking forward to concluding the recruitment during the fall this year. That is our plan. And we expect to have data around this time next year. Next, please. A few words on the preclinical candidates, 757, focusing on apathy, 942 and 1117. Next, please. So for 757, we have a quite broad indication area here. This is treatment for apathy. And apathy is a syndrome where you have loss of initiative, interest, and emotional expressions. This is different from depression, and it's really frustrating for the patient, but also for the caregivers. And there is no treatment for apathy today. We think that we have discovered a new way to address this issue with this program. And we are right now in the final stages of the preclinical development, including CMC. And we expect to be phase 1 ready during the fall or at the end of this year with this program. For 942, we are looking at improvement of cognition, and here we have the full preclinical package indicates a clear cognitive enhancement across different types of cognitive modalities. And we are right now also here in the middle of the IND-enabling studies and the development of the CMC. And when I say development of CMC, I mean the production of the product or the compound according to GMP, but also a drug product. That is a capsule or a tablet. And then 1117, which Gunnar alluded to, which we think is a really important discovery that we've made in our laboratories. Here we have a once-daily treatment for the core symptoms of Parkinson's disease. This doesn't sound very compelling, perhaps once daily. What does that matter? Well, it has a huge impact for the patients. Today, they are taking the levodopa medication up to 6-8 times a day, which leads to fluctuations, variations in efficacy. Here we can possibly provide a treatment which has sustained efficacy over the 24-hour cycle. Next, please. Apathy as such is quite common in neurological disorders, and there is some publications out there indicating it varies between 20 to 80, 90% for each indication, including Alzheimer, vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, but also Parkinson's disease. And the reason for apathy, or the hypothesis for the occurrence of apathy, is a disruption of connections between cortical areas and subcortical areas in the brain. We believe that 757, through the mechanism it actually have both potential for symptomatic treatment and disease modification. There is some support for disease modifying properties with molecules of this type. I'll come back to that later on. Next. Looking at cognitive impairment in neurological disorders, it's also very, very common. 25 to 30% of all patients with PD have dementia, and 12% of all people above 65 years have problems with cognitive impairment. So this is a huge indication area, and there are, of course, treatment options out there today, such as cholinesterase inhibitors and NMDA antagonists, such as memantine, but they come with side effects, and here we are looking at something that could have a better efficacy without the traditional side effects you get from these treatments. Next, please. Going back to 1117, we touched upon that a couple of times during this call today. But in principle, we have been able to solve a problem, and this is, of course, from an R&D perspective, from the scientist's perspective, a quite fascinating program, since we've solved the problem that has been hanging around in the field for the last 60 years, since the introduction of levodopa. So we have discovered novel class of molecules which can have a full anti-Parkinsonian effect in preclinical models without compromising motor function, without the fluctuations, and a long-lasting effect in the models that we have used up to actually beyond 10 hours of treatment effect in rodent models of Parkinson's disease. Next, please. So we'll stop here with that little update, and I'll hand over the microphone and camera to Victor.
Thank you, Nicholas. So a glance at the figures. Please, next slide. Well, we can see that we still have a quite high cash position of a bit more than 200 million kronor. If we look at the cost in the middle of the slide, we can see that we have quite much higher cost this quarter than we've had previously. A lot of that has to do with the one-time cost associated with the termination of the last CEO during February, which has affected this quarter as a one-time cost and will not have any effects on the quarters going forward. So that is not cash flow. That doesn't have any cash flow effects. So the cash flow during the quarter was a bit more than 40 million kronor, which is in line with the previous quarters. However, even though we subtract the one-time cost for the CEO from this quarter's cost, we have an increase in the costs, and that is mostly has to do with the investments in the Phase IIb study in Pirepemat, and also advancing the preclinical projects 757, 942, and 1117 towards clinical Phase I. So that is what drives the cost. As you can see to the right in the slide, we have maintained the number of employees. We are about 30 people here, highly efficient, and we think that this is quite a good level at the moment. Having said that, and that we have over 200 million in cash, and we have increased cost, we have an increased focus on cost control and the development of the preclinical assets. We do that with cost control limitations, you could say. So we are doing everything we need to, but we still have a cost control. So next slide, please. Well, not just, but the analysts that cover us, Redeye, ABG, and Edison, and they will have some questions after this presentation. And having said that, Gunnar, some final words.
Okay, so short summary, and let's start with our development portfolio. And as I said before, we view this as world-leading portfolio in Parkinson's disease with regard to compounds in development. Mesdopetam, our lead compound, partnered with Ipsen, we finalized the Phase IIb study, and we are now starting planning for Phase III. Pirepemat, we have started the Phase IIb study to find the right dose and see if we have a dose-dependent efficacy in preventing falls. We anticipate the finalization of patient recruitment during the year and top-line results first half next year. 942, our candidate drug going for treatment of cognitive impairment. And as Nicholas said, of course, we have a focus on Parkinson, but this will also have the possibility of going broader for other patients' categories with cognitive impairment. 757, our candidate drug for apathy. And again, as Nicholas stated, apathy is occurring in a number of neurological diseases. And of course, we anticipate the effect to be across these different situations. And lastly, 1117, our molecule that aims to treat the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson, but without the limitations that we see from levodopa, the present available treatment. Next slide, please. Some anticipated key development milestones over the next 18 months. Starting in Q2 this year, We are working with Ipsen on the mesdopetam data, and we hope to be able to present all the data during this year. Second half this year, we should see 757 to be phase I ready. Pirepemat, we aim to have the patient recruitment completed. And for 942, we continue to prepare for phase I study. And first half next year, Pirepemat phase IIb top line data announced. To have 942 phase I ready, and to have 1117 continue preclinical development to aim for phase I study preparation. When it comes to events, we will continue to have participation in investor events as well as medical and scientific congresses over the next 18 months. And then for the second half this year, we're planning to have a capital markets day. Next slide. So again, IRLAB at a glance. Pioneering biology and a unique ISP for identification of new candidate drugs. Focus strategy to Parkinson and all its complications through the disease journey. Validated our way of working from CD selection to delivering positive clinical results, and our first program out-licensed to major pharma. A broad and solid, and I would say world-leading portfolio in Parkinson with unique molecules with high potential, all coming out of our ISP platform, and an organization positioned for success. Thank you. And I think that this leads us into the last part, and that is the question and answer session.
So much, Gunnar and Nicholas and Victor. Very interesting presentation indeed. So it's time for the equity analysts to shoot their questions, and we will start off with Sue Romanoff of Edison. Please go ahead with your question, Sue.
Thank you for the update and taking my questions. So we understand that you're not going to be able to disclose much on the Ipsen's path forward for mesdopetam, but we're really encouraged by the first quarter report with Ipsen conducting preparatory phase III pharmacokinetic studies and manufacturing of mesdopetam. Can we infer that the preparation is still ongoing as planned?
All the activities are ongoing as planned, but as I stated, we have initiated discussions on the next way forward as a way to really give the compound the best chances to get to registration and to get to patients in need. I cannot today disclose any details of the discussions that we are holding at the moment because they are still ongoing, and according to the contractual agreements, we are not able to unilaterally communicate anything on those details.
Right, that's helpful. So for IRL 757, it's going to be in phase I ready by the end of this fiscal year. Can we assume that this is a strategic priority with IRLAB's preclinical pipeline?
I definitely think so. And the reason why we say phase I ready, that is that in order to go into the phase I study to get it up and running, there is a need to agree with CROs to do the activities, and those type of discussions are ongoing at the moment that we can't disclose exact starting date for that reason. But definitely our activities for preclinical development are on schedule, and they are moving ahead with the aim to have a phase I ready product before the end of the year.
And any other preclinical assets and updates on how they're progressing would be helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, when you do the development activities to get to an IND and the permission to do clinical phase 1 studies, there are this is a very regulated type of activities, and of course we follow all the regulations. We are doing all the activities to be able to produce the material and to produce the study material, that is capsules or tablets for the studies. In parallel, we are doing all the toxicology programs that are needed to really make sure that it is good safety when you start to dose in human beings. So everything there is running according to the schedule.
Great. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Sue Romanoff. And let's move on to Gonzalo Artiac at ABG Sundal Collier. Please go ahead.
Hi, and thank you for taking my questions. The first one is that, I mean, it's on, again, following from before the Ipsen situation. Now you have communicated that you are in ongoing discussions with them since the beginning of May to decide the best path forward for mesdopetam. And I could imagine that these discussions come as a result of having now the whole data set completely analyzed. So now you have a better picture of the efficacy data from the study. Could you give us some color on this, and how clear are the reasons now of the discrepancies between the different endpoints now that you have probably a better picture? Thank you.
As Nicolas stated, and actually communicated in January, we do see a very clear anti-dyskinetic effect. And what we also can say that is that we see very good dose response pattern. And this is important because if you have a dose response pattern when you test a drug for certain effects, then you know almost for sure that this works. If you only have one dose, you never know, is there a chance finding or is it something all that's going on? But if you do have a dose response pattern, you're pretty sure there is an effect. This coupled with a couple of additional things. First, of course, the very good safety tolerability profile, because if you should be able to use the product, of course, you need to have a good safety tolerability profile. And that is really what limits today's available therapy for dyskinesias. Very, I would say, very severe side effect potential, which limits the use and which also limits the dose level that you use in order to try to avoid side effects. We don't foresee any of that problems with mesdopetam. On top of this, the very important finding that we don't impair the levodopa treatment effect when giving our compound is extremely important. That plus the fact that we also see a dose response pattern for off effect or off time effect, I should say. So I think that the in-depth analysis, I could say that it has confirmed the anti-dyskinetic effect that we reported in January.
Okay, thank you very much. And a second question, of course, now if Ipsen decides to move forward as planned, then the clinical development will just continue as expected. But putting ourselves in a hypothetical case where Ipsen does not consider the risk benefit good enough to support a phase 3, and what are the plans that you will have for the molecule? Would you consider to move forward alone, given the fact that you have already, as you nicely described, positive signs of anti-dyskinetic effects, or financially would that be too complicated? Or would you just like to prioritize the molecule and focus on Pirepemat?
First of all, I want to really emphasize that what I'm now stating that is completely hypothetical, since we don't really know where the ongoing discussions will land. But we are, so to say, mentally preparing ourselves for all the different scenarios and see what can we do to prepare us for different scenarios? Of course, one scenario is to continue with Ipsen as the initial contract states. Other scenarios would be that if I take the other extreme, that is that if we were to take this on, we are definitely committed to see that mesdopetam should come to the benefit of patients. All our both commercial as well as regulatory advisors have a very strong belief in the potential of mesdopetam. So if that would be the case, that we would take this from IRLAB's point of view, we would of course need to evaluate all kind of other potential ways to get it forward. But the compound has such quality that definitely we believe that this should come to registration and to the benefit of patients.
Yeah, no, that's clear. Thank you very much. And one last question, if I can. As you probably have seen, about a week ago, PharmaTher applied for fast-track designation to the FDA for the use of ketamine in low dose for the treatment of PD leads. If I'm not wrong, they are planning now for a phase 3. So what they have seen in the YSRS is that they have a 41% reduction of dyskinesias from baseline to after 3 months. How good do you think this is? I mean, not just in efficacy, but also in terms of safety, and how much does this compare with what you could see with mesdopetam?
I think for me, there is still the need to understand how they are going to use the ketamine product. And the reason I say this is that we're dealing here with a molecule that has an extremely short half-life. So the big question for me is, how do you dose it so that you cover the treatment period you want to cover? Secondly, it is a compound with very difficult pharmacokinetic and a lot of drug interaction potentials. And what we know with Parkinson patients that are elderly, that is that they take a lot of medication. And how you will be able to, in a safe way, handle the product in this patient category is still something that I think needs to be proven.
Okay, thank you very much.
Artiak, and let's move on to the third equity analyst, that is Fredrik Thor at Redeye. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if you could develop a bit on cost developments for 23 and 24. I mean, given the activities you have planned, if you can detail a bit more throughout the year.
I think that I take some help from Victor here. So I ask Victor, could you please...
Sure. This is not something that we have guided upon, but you could see that what we have said is that the cost during the quarters, the past 3-4 quarters, has been around or a bit more than 40 million kronor. And we're also stating that the activities in the lab and in the clinics are increasing. So then you can draw your own conclusions, basically. And that is also why we said that we have a strict cost control in the company at the moment, doing the things we need to do and doing everything we have to maintain the regulatory requirements and so on in all the projects. But we have keep a close eye on the cost at the moment.
Perfect. And maybe a question for Nicholas about the 942 in cognitive impairment. I mean, given the advancements within Alzheimer's disease, could you maybe elaborate? Is there a potential in Alzheimer's? And is this something you look at?
Absolutely. As I alluded to, this is both 757 and 942, which is the compound designed for cognitive improvement or impairments, have a broader scope than just Parkinson's disease. And that's something we're actually looking into quite carefully right now, how to best move those two assets forward, given that they have the potential beyond Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, I think that's actually all the questions I had. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fredrik. And that will be all the questions for today. So thank you so much to Gunnar, Nicholas, and Victor for your presentation. And to you who have been watching, please see us again within 3 months. Thank you.